Estamos continuando o evento do primeiro Fórum de Aprendizagem Transformadora, que começou ontem com a presença da professora Vitória Marcic, da Columbia University, e hoje nós temos o prazer de receber outros brilhantes palestrantes aqui, que vieram para compartilhar as suas experiências conosco. Eu quero agradecer a presença do reitor, Dr. Marco Túlio, dos meus colegas pró-reitores, dos diretores da Direx, dos diretores das unidades, dos coordenadores, dos professores, enfim, muito obrigada pelo tempo de vocês aqui conosco. Quero agradecer ao professor Jeff King, professor Paul Dervan, Sandra Thompson, Peter Taylor e Naline Shantland por estarem aqui conosco. Muito obrigada, é uma honra para todos nós. Vou pedir para vocês, durante o evento, irem colocando as questões que vocês têm no chat. Vocês podem endereçar as perguntas para os painelistas no chat. Por favor, escrevam em português, porque eu vou ler as perguntas de vocês em português e a tradutora vai fazer a transcrição em inglês. Claro que nós não vamos conseguir, nós somos muito, responder todas as questões, mas aquelas mais recorrentes serão endereçadas. Quem não teve oportunidade, eu vou pedir, nós colocamos no site do fórum um texto e vídeos que eles nos enviaram, então quem ainda não teve oportunidade, se puder assistir os vídeos, se puder ler depois os textos, façam isso, que acho que vai ser bem interessante. Como que vai funcionar? Eu vou começar apresentando os palestrantes e depois vou fazer uma pergunta para cada um deles, e assim, de questão em questão, eles vão colocando as suas experiências para nós. Então, eu vou apresentar, em primeiro lugar, o professor Jeff King, da Universidade Central de Oklahoma. Ele que instituiu o sistema Stellar Student Transformative Learning Record, que é o registro de aprendizagem transformadora do aluno da Universidade Central de Oklahoma. Ele foi meu supervisor de pós-doutorado e vem disseminando a experiência de Oklahoma ao redor do mundo. E vão estar com a gente assessorando-nos na nossa trajetória aqui na UPM também. Peter Taylor é professor da Murdoch University, na Austrália. Ele tem uma forte reputação internacional pelas suas pesquisas e iniciativas de educação transformadora orientada ao desenvolvimento sustentável. Ele tem uma longa trajetória como supervisor, orientador e mentor de muitos educadores em universidades na Ásia, na África e no Pacífico Sul. Ele trabalha na Universidade de Murdoch, que é classificada como uma das 100 melhores universidades jovens do mundo. Naline Shantland é da Durban University of Technology, da África do Sul, é a coordenadora de desenvolvimento de pessoal no Centro de Excelência em Ensino-Aprendizagem. Os princípios da aprendizagem transformadora e da reflexidade crítica sustentam sua prática de desenvolvimento docente. Ela participa como membro do comitê diretor em um projeto de colaboração nacional envolvendo 15 universidades sul-africanas e participa da Rede Internacional de Pesquisa Educacional Transformadora. Sandra Thompson e Paul Dervan são da Technological University of Dublin, a maior universidade da Irlanda. Eles são os principais arquitetos e co-líderes da iniciativa Student Transformative Learning Record, que é o registro de aprendizagem transformadora dos alunos da sua instituição. E entre os seus interesses de pesquisa estão a aprendizagem centrada no aluno e o uso da tecnologia para aprimorar o envolvimento e o aprendizado dos alunos. Então, feitas essas introduções, nesse momento, eu vou dar início à nossa atividade, perguntando para o Jeff King, né? Por que, Jeff, aprendizagem transformadora deve ser um conceito que atravessa toda a universidade, né? Uma meta a ser perseguida enquanto um valor central para em todo o campus. E, além disso, a gente gostaria de ouvir de você também qual é a importância de acompanhar e documentar o progresso da transformação dos alunos, né, durante o seu período na universidade e como vocês têm feito isso na UCO. Muito obrigada.
Obrigado, Jeanette. Thank you for thank you for the introduction, and thank you to Universidade Presbiteriana Mackenzie for the opportunity to share a little bit about transformative learning. And Jeanette, I've prepared just a very, very brief PowerPoint that I'll share as a way to help answer your questions. I'm very excited to have the opportunity to do that, and think that this may be a little bit of assistance. First of all, the question about why in higher education it makes sense to practice transformative learning. And there are several reasons, but two that I'd like to highlight are that it is a kind of teaching that's needed now to address challenges in higher education. And I'll explain exactly why in just a minute. But transformative learning is also a kind of education that students today need, because at university today, students very much need the development of things more than simply learning the content in a course. Employers, for example, are extremely interested that college graduates know their chemistry or sociology or accounting or whatever the discipline is in their major when they graduate. But employers are also extremely interested in knowing that recent college graduates are able to, for example, work on a team with people who are different from them and who may disagree with them. Or recent graduates in the workplace should be able to lead when the situation demands. So these are simply two examples of the kind of knowledge, skills, worldviews even, that college graduates should possess in order to succeed, not just in their job, but in order to succeed in contributing to society. And so transformative learning is very well suited to making all of that happen. And with apologies to my esteemed colleagues on the panel for oversimplifying transformative learning, I know that most professors in higher education in the United States and in many places around the world are not familiar with this process of transformative learning. And in answering your first question, Jeanette, about why transformative learning should be used at university, the process is literally what helps all humans address the challenges that are so very important right now. And those challenges include, of course, the coronavirus, the very extreme challenge presented by COVID-19. There's a challenge around the world in terms of people working to change racial and social injustice. There's a challenge environmentally. There's a challenge to keep the cultures, the language that enrich our global society. And so transformative learning is so well suited to address these challenges because transformative learning is triggered when a disorienting dilemma is presented to someone. And certainly the coronavirus is a disorienting dilemma for all of us and for higher education. When this dilemma is presented, then we have to critically self-reflect in order to determine what is our way of approaching this disorienting dilemma, and do we have any biases that might give us blind spots in trying to figure out a solution. Through that process of critical reflection, we then change or expand our perspective in order to fit what was before the disorienting dilemma into our current worldview. And so, Jeanette, your question about why is transformative learning well suited for higher education, that would be my answer. It's because professors are able to help their students develop this very important process of determining how to expand themselves, how to grow as human beings, how to notice their progression across the arc of their own development. And that all can happen in addition to helping students learn the content in the course, but yet there's this added dimension of professors being able to help their students develop in ways that will motivate and equip the students to contribute to the social good immediately upon graduation. So, Jeanette, I'll move on to one of your other questions about the process for doing this and how you can track making this happen. And I'll start by illustrating in higher education across the years, the approach that has been taken is initially information was transmitted in the classroom to learners, and learners were just on their own supposed to learn it and spit the information back on a test, an exam. Then more and more professors began working in a transactional model in which, in order for students to learn, there was an expected transaction that had to occur. But moving to transformation means that by using our student transformative learning record initiative, you can actually know when your students are developing these important skills for contributing to society, contributing immediately in the workplace. And I'll finish simply by saying the process that we've had in place to do this is what we're so excited to be working with Jeanette and Universidade Presbiteriana Mackenzie to help in place, because you will be able to adapt and adopt the student transformative learning record process to your own particular needs, your own mission and values and vision. And in doing so, you would be able to track and actually see your students develop in these ways across their time at university. And finally, as Jeanette had indicated, we have been quite successful with this for 6 years now at our university here in Oklahoma, but we have helped a number of other universities in the United States as well as around the world, such as in Ireland and in other places, South Africa, Iraq, New Zealand, as well as Brazil. And so I'm very much eager and excited to be able to contribute however I can. Thank you, Jeanette.
Obrigada, Jeff, né, pelas suas palavras aí, compartilhando conosco a sua experiência em Transformative Learning. Eu vou, então, passar a palavra para o professor Peter Taylor, e perguntando, professor, por que a aprendizagem transformadora é uma abordagem interessante para a educação superior quando uma instituição deseja que seus alunos e graduados valorizem a agenda da sustentabilidade e tomem medidas para melhorar a nossa relação com o meio ambiente, com questões como pobreza, justiça social, equidade e assim por diante. Muito obrigada desde já.
And thanks, Jeff, for your wonderfully well-focused and succinct account of transformative learning. I'm presuming that you can hear me, Jeanette. Just nod your head if you can hear me okay. No? Yes? Well,
sim,
let's hope.
sim.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Obrigado. Okay, so to answer your question, Jeanette, it's a tough question and it could take several hours, and I'm glad I've only got 10 minutes. I'd like to just start off with a little bit of context. I've been working in the field of education for 45 plus years as a high school teacher, and then I moved into academia. And my basic area of interest and expertise is STEM education, with a particular focus on science and mathematics education. And for the last many years, I've been working with postgraduate research students, mentoring them and looking after them from many different countries across the world. They have recognized that there are many global challenges that need to be faced, particularly in relation to sustainable development of the world. And I found over time that developing researchers as transformative learners was, as Jeff was saying, an entirely appropriate and very powerful approach to helping my students who are teachers and teacher educators in universities to expand their worldviews and to develop themselves as agents of change. So I mean, there are many global challenges, and I couldn't possibly begin to put them all up, but here are three major ones that we have been addressing over the last 10 or 15 years. The notion of cultural extinction and linguistic extinction. That's pretty much why Black Lives Matter movement has come into the foreground recently. Global warming and all of the issues that brings with it. And plastic pollution, which is a terrible blight on our natural environment. So we've been addressing these challenges through research as transformative learning. And I'm inspired by the United Nations recent report called Transforming Our World 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And I've just highlighted three of their major principles here that I'd like to speak to today. The United Nations report argues very powerfully that we should be in education focusing on developing and ensuring the well-being of humanity and of the planet. The two are inseparable. We exist in spaceship Earth, and there's no planet B, so we really have to look after planet A, and in doing so, we'll be looking after ourselves as well. There's no amount of knowledge about how to do this or why to do this that's going to get us to their destination of ensuring the well-being of the humanity and the planet, unless we include a focus on ethical values. It's what we value that drives our actions. No matter what we know can know something and not actually pursue that goal unless we value doing so. So values, and particularly ethical and moral values, are a very, very powerful driving force towards sustainable development. And the other really important principle here is that we're not just looking after ourselves, we're looking after the future generation. Talking about an intergenerational commitment here. Our children and our children's children, and so on and so forth. We must be mindful in education for sustainable development that we're not going to solve all the problems in the world ourselves in this generation, but we must empower the young people, particularly in our case, the teachers who are going out into schools all around the world to educate the next generation and help them to develop the powerful skills, mindset, and values in particular that they can bring to that task as change agents. I think Jeff talked about the tradition of transmission education, and I'd just like to touch on that for a moment. I call this the two worlds challenge. We have the external world, that's the wonderful planet on which we live, the physical world, if you like. And we have the inner world, the world inside each one of us that we share with each other. Now, in traditional STEM learning in classrooms, and this was certainly my experience when I did my undergraduate degree in physics, the world was presented to us as a series of objects, events, systems, and natural laws. And we were called upon as students to apply our thoughts and, to some degree, hands-on learning, and to value that type of learning. And I've put valuing there in italics because it's a diminished form of valuing. It's a form of valuing which is pretty much almost masquerading as value neutral in terms of being objective about how we understand the physical world around us. And I'm going to argue in a moment that this view of the inner world is quite an impoverished one, but it does lead, and it has led, to very important objective knowledge. So I'm not decrying objective knowledge. What I am saying is it's only one form of knowledge, and it's not sufficient to address our challenges of sustainable development. Transformative learning, on the other hand, deals with this external world, but it does a lot more with the people, the students who engage with that external world. It empowers them with a much more deep-seated form of thinking, which I'll touch in a moment. Jeff talked about critical reflective thinking, and that is certainly a major part of this. Feelings, emotions, bringing our emotions into play to feel the world around us, not just to understand it in a sort of an analytical way, but to have an emotional relationship with the natural world. Some would call it love. And this brings a whole new set of values into play about valuing our relationship with the world, valuing nature, valuing the culturally different other. These are values that spring from our inner sense of well-being and in turn nourish our sense of well-being. We also are very interested in helping students to imagine how the world can be a better place, how it should be a better place. And in many cases, we're talking about helping students to develop a spiritual relationship with humanity. Now, that can be any form of spirituality, any form of religion. I'm not pointing at anyone in particular here. So what we have here is the development of not just objective knowledge about the external world, but also the development of our students' subjective knowledge, their inner knowing. And we bring these two together, we get a very powerful synthesis, which we can call holistic knowledge. Transformative learning in today's education circles is attributed largely to Jack Mezirow and his wonderful formative work that he undertook in the late part of the 20th century. Mezirow drew on some very powerful historic figures such as John Dewey and Jürgen Habermas in philosophy. He also drew on Abraham Maslow's work in social psychology. And I think we can continue to add to this wonderful mix with people such as Carol Gilligan, who brings a feminist perspective, and Parker Palmer, who I find very inspiring, who talks about the courage to bring your heart into teaching. Now, there are many other scholars. I've just chosen those few for the moment. What we have deduced from all the scholarship on transformative learning are these 5 dimensions. And I unfortunately don't have a lot of time to dig in and unpack each one in turn. But let me just say this. Cultural self-learning. It's about understanding one's own cultural situatedness, becoming much more aware of our value systems, of our wisdom traditions, historically and contemporaneously, It's about reflecting on ourselves and having a better understanding of our inner worlds. Relational learning focuses on forming a really deep empathic understanding, particularly of a culturally different other and also of the natural world. Critical social learning is about understanding what the problems are in society and globally that are preventing us from actually putting in practice social, sustainable development practices. We could talk about many different aspects of what's wrong with the world at the moment. That's that finger pointing out. But we also must realize that those three fingers point back towards the person. So critical self-reflection is so important to be aware of how we are contributing to the problems in the world around us. Visionary and ethical learning. This is about understanding, imagining, dreaming about how the world could be a better place, and then bringing ethical values into play to say, how should it be a better place? And this is where we get the commitment, the moral commitment to take action. And that's what practical learning is about. It's about engaging in the world, not just sitting back in an armchair and pontificating about how the world should be better, but actually getting out there and making a difference. And this is where teachers can bring transformative learning practices into their teaching and help students to develop these 5 dimensions of their education, as well as in conjunction with developing their objective knowledge of the external world. So in a nutshell, over the last century, basically, these are the different paradigms that we have in educational research in the social sciences. They generate different forms of knowing or knowledge. Positivism is the classic from the sciences. Interpretivism comes out of anthropology. Criticalism comes out of sociology. Postmodernism brings the arts, all the wonderful poetic and visual arts into our hands as methodological tools, and integralism offers us an opportunity to combine all of that together in a very rich matrix of different ways of producing knowledge. I can't go into the details of this right now, but suffice to say, objectivity, reliability, and validity are not the universal standards. They apply certainly to the positivist sciences, but other standards apply to the quality of knowledge that we generate in the subsequent paradigms, much of which is personal knowledge about ourselves and others. So our research is transformative learning. Graduate students doing masters and PhD degrees have embraced this, what we call multi-paradigm approach to doing their research, and they have grown enormously in terms of understanding their inner worlds. Much of what I'm saying now in a really high-speed manner is illustrated in this book that was published just last year by myself and my good colleague, Professor Balchandra Luitel at Kathmandu University in Nepal, which is one of the world's strongest centers of researchers' transformative learning for sustainable development, environmentally and culturally. And I'll finish with one little example here. Dr. Yuli Ramwati, Director of Chemistry Education, State University of Jakarta in Indonesia, completed her PhD in 2012. She returned to her university as a chemistry lecturer and has now become the director of the chemistry education section. She developed, she teaches the Master of Chemistry teaching program, and she developed a particular pedagogy based on transformative learning and teaching that she calls culturally responsive transformative teaching. What she does is to teach the content of chemistry, the objective knowledge. She engages her students in addition in developing their own inner world knowledge, their subjective knowledge, wrapping them together to help her students who are going to be teachers in schools to go out and teach chemistry in schools all over Indonesia, to bring this approach to their teaching practices. She does it in 2 particular ways. She focuses on green chemistry. She has her students investigate how chemistry can be less harmful to the environment. For example, the plastics. What are the alternatives to plastic? Well, the organic alternatives to plastics. So sustainability values are very much a strong part, a central part. The other part is ethnochemistry. Across Indonesia, there are 600 different language groups. There are many, many, many different cultural values and practices that have existed for hundreds and thousands of years in terms of people's relationship with the natural environment around them. So ethnochemistry is a source of cultural values and cultural wisdom. So she has her students go out and do research on the cultural values from their backgrounds and combine them with this notion of green chemistry, bringing together two sets of really powerful values. This type of research is going on in many countries around the world. These transformative education research groups represent students who've graduated from our program at Curtin and then at Murdoch universities, and they are at various stages of developing transformative learning in their professional practices. So, high speed, I'm afraid. I'm more than happy to answer some questions, so thank you for your kind attention. I'll hand back to you, Jeanette.
Obrigada, professor Peter Taylor, por as suas palavras, né, ressaltando a importância da gente preparar os alunos para responder a problemas reais do mundo, né, problemas que a gente vem enfrentando em termos de sustentabilidade, de modo geral, seja ele nas questões de justiça social, seja elas nas questões do meio ambiente, e que isso, quer dizer, que o nosso papel envolve uma profunda discussão ética e trabalhar também com as emoções, né, a nossa relação conosco mesmo e com o outro neste planeta, né? Acho que foi muito importante aí as suas palavras e a gente volta depois com as questões né, dos professores em relação a essa temática. E então agora vou para a professora Naline Shetland, da University de Durban, e eu gostaria de perguntar para você, Naline, considerando sua experiência com aprendizagem transformadora e no desenvolvimento de professores, o que você pode nos dizer que tem ajudado os docentes a melhorar as suas práticas e fazer com que os alunos tenham sucesso em seu caminho de aprendizagem e de transformação? Muito obrigada.
Obrigada, Jeanette. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, Nelly, I can.
Great. I'm going to share my screen, Jeanette. Please let me know if you can see my screen. I'll just give it some time to start.
Oh, yes, I can see it.
You can see it, Jeanette?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sim, sim, perfeito.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to share some thoughts, and thank you for the question, Jeanette. I'm Nalini, and I am from South Africa, and I work in the field of professional development. I work with faculty or professors, and our main emphasis is on enhancing our pedagogical practices, our assessments, and our curricula. So I've chosen a topic to speak on, to share my thoughts. And I've chosen the topic of transformative learning, a tectonic mind shift. And Jeanette, to answer your question about how we engage with professors in enhancing practices, I think the most important thing from my side and for us in South Africa is to understand our context within which we teach in higher education. So I'm very briefly going to go through the context, and I want to just highlight, Jeanette, that I have quite a few slides, but I won't spend too much of time going through all of them. I will leave them for our professors to go through later on at your leisure. So as some of you may know about South Africa, We are a democracy for only 26 years, which means that we are still a young democracy. We engage and have challenges similar to many other countries in the world, associated with poverty, with education, and with unemployment. So higher education and education in general seems to be serving the purpose of socio-economic improvement. In South Africa, we have a massified higher education system that is deeply embedded in a culture and in a history which is somewhat a painful history. Like many other countries in the world, there are issues of performativity and managerialism that impact on what we do in higher education. So there is a huge drive against transformation imperatives in the country. And transformation is a broad term and means different things for different professors and academics and faculties at the university. So from the early 1980s, we have at higher education universities in South Africa engaged in what we call professional development, working with faculty and professors, looking at how we can enhance the educational practices. And these kinds of professional development engagements occurred along a continuum of working with improving success rate, but working with transforming higher education. And I want to just share with you, as Jeff highlighted, that a dilemma brings about the kind of transformation we want to see happening in our higher education institutions. And in South Africa in 2015, and between 2015 and 2017, the country had undergone a massive student protest. And for us in higher education, this was a dilemma that caught us in quite unawares, but not really unawares, in the sense that we had to really rethink what it is that we are doing in higher education. What presence and purpose is higher education serving in the country? And you would find that our history had significantly shaped what happens in higher education. And this brought about what, and it's not a new concept, the idea of the decolonial turn, and has made more evident the coloniality of being, the coloniality of power, and the coloniality of knowledge. And our students were telling us that higher education is still a racialized system. 26 years after democracy, we're still experiencing the kind of alienation, the kind of materials our students cannot engage with, and they have felt that there's still much presence of the past in the present. So it took us back into ourselves and asked us, what is it that our higher education is serving in terms of the needs of our current students, given that there's a massified higher education system. And for us in professional development, it meant that we need to look at how higher education can become more fair, more equitable, more inclusive, and more socially just. So it meant that professors and academics have to revisit, as Jeff had highlighted and Peter had highlighted, we have to revisit our values, our beliefs, and the assumptions we were making about what did we see as the purpose of higher education, what knowledges are we drawing on, what curricula are our higher education systems based on, what materials and books, and even the social structures and the physical structures in our university that majority of our students could not identify with. And this led us to revisiting all of these assumptions. I'm not going to go too much into this because Jeff has already highlighted what transformative learning is about. But I thought the idea of the tectonic mind shift is a useful metaphor to think about transformative learning as an approach that takes us beneath the surface of ourselves, where the rupturing occurs. It's about this deep critical analysis, and Jeff has already highlighted the idea of perspective transformation. And when we engage in this deep dive within our own selves, we emerge on the surface, bringing about the radical changes. So what transformative learning has done is it makes the invisible more visible. The beliefs and assumptions and values that we have that drive us on a daily basis is invisible. We cannot see our values. So when we go deep down, it brings up to the surface that which we cannot really see, but which guides us in our daily activities. And we realize in South Africa that context is an important aspect of what we need to recognize and do as professors and as faculty members. And Peter has already highlighted this idea of the finger pointing. As professors, we often look outside of ourselves to see what else contributes to our pedagogical activities. And what transformative learning is saying, it's let's take this critical eye inward. It's an inward, deep gaze. And Peter's already spoken about the idea of critical reflexivity, which is about taking deep dives within ourselves. And when we engage in these deep dives, we ask ourselves, how have I been complicit in uncritically contributing to the status quo that we have in our universities? I want to just highlight that when I say I also mean we. So we as a higher education, we as a country, and we as a world, what are we doing as a world and a country in being transformative or in maintaining the status quo? So these are some of the ways in which I have adapted transformative learning when I engage with our professors at our university. And so for me, and the way I've used transformative learning is that when we engage in these deep dives of going within ourselves, transformative learning is about generating knowledge. It's about generating knowledge of the self. And the self is an identity. So we look at not just the individual self, but we look at the university self. So we're generating knowledge about the university. When the university goes into its own self and bend backwards, it's generating knowledge about what it is it's valuing, what are the assumptions that are being made. So when we engage in transformative learning, we are also generating knowledge about knowledge. What kinds of knowledge is valued in higher education? How do these knowledge legitimate who our students are or not legitimate? And then we're generating knowledge about the others beside ourselves. And I'll speak a little bit about other right at the end in a little while. So transformative learning, which has already been highlighted by both Jeff and Peter, is about values. And my colleague Jack Whitehead talks about the living educational theory. What is my educational influence as I engage in these deep dives on my own learning, myself, with others, and about the social systems? So we need to understand that higher education and the world is continuously in flux. We are not fixed, we remain in becoming. And so this process of continuous learning, continuous questioning, relearning, sometimes unlearning the way we have done things and relearn for a more transformative and just higher education system. In South Africa, specifically for us, we are guided by these ideas of the decolonial attitude and the decolonial turn. So we look at how higher education can be decontextualized or how our curriculum can be decolonized. And these are some of the important things for us. So I very quickly will draw on just a few examples. If I don't have time, Jeanette, I will leave the examples for our professors to look through and to read at their own time. So Peter had mentioned the ideas of Parker Palmer. And Parker Palmer says, we teach who we are. So in some of my professional development workshops with my faculty and professors, we get them first to identify who is the professor, the faculty, the academic in this current moment. What has shaped your practice? What are your values? And what is your teaching philosophy? And in this example, my colleague Mary, who is a coffee lover, had used the example of coffee and coffee beans to demonstrate her teaching philosophy and how she sees teaching and learning in her higher education engagements. She says, just very briefly, that the coffee beans represents her students and that she needs to understand her students. She needs to understand the conditions from where they came. She said that sometimes, further down in this next paragraph, is that she needs to put in some heat to get that perfect shot of espresso, right? She needs to understand how she brews, like a barista, how she brews the coffee. She needs to understand how she develops her students. So engaging in this idea of identifying who am I and what shapes me is one of the first steps in the ideas of engaging in transformative learning. But as we found earlier on, that transformative learning requires that we go a little deeper. We need to go and understand what are the assumptions. I'm going to share my own personal example. When I was a student with Peter Taylor here many years ago, and in South Africa, we have 11 official languages, but our medium of instruction is English. And those many years ago, I was teaching a subject called physics, and my students were experiencing challenges because they had to learn physics through the medium of English, and they are not English first language speakers. So it led me to go deep into myself and ask myself, what was I trying to engage in my higher education practice? What was I imposing my Western ideas and worldviews upon my students? What assumptions did I make about who my students were and what their learning experiences were? And so it led me to revisit my physics teaching and learning in higher education. I'm not going to spend too much on this, Jeanette, due to time constraints. I will move very quickly to the next example. The example I mentioned right at the beginning about the South African higher education context in 2015, that really was a disorienting dilemma for us, where majority of our higher education institutions engaged with student protests. And in the student protests, students were saying that they do not recognize what's happening in curricula. They were actually misrecognized is some of the research that's coming out about the student protests. And it enabled us as academics and faculty in higher education to relook at what are the knowledges that we are drawing on for our higher education. How do we structure as our curricula? And when we're structuring our curricula, where do we select the knowledges from? And how then do we engage with this curricula in the pedagogical approaches? And do these aspects of knowledge, curriculum, and pedagogy speak to what our higher education system is asking us in terms of transformation of higher education? And you would realize that each of these areas requires that we make choices. And these choices are based on assumptions. And sometimes these assumptions are based on who we are, what our histories are, and how we've been conditioned by our histories and our contexts. So it meant again that we need to go back within ourselves and revisit in a transformer of learning way what these assumptions are. And these were quite revealing and has brought about a number of research in the South African context. I move very quickly to the final example. And the final example is a national project with 15 universities. We are engaged in a collective inquiry. This project is about a professional development program, and it has emanated from the experiences we have undergone over the last 5 years with respect to decolonization of higher education and decolonization of the curriculum. And we are working quite intensively on looking at pedagogies relevant for our particular context. Pedagogies that value who our students are, their being, and who they become in the process of our engagement. Pedagogies that value engagement and seeing, not just looking, but seeing and valuing our students. Pedagogies that take into consideration knowledge generation for our context, and pedagogies for transformation and decoloniality. And this is just another example and research that we are engaging with professional developers. And we know that the ultimate beneficiaries of this kind of research is a more transformative experience for our students in South Africa. So Jeanette, just to round off, I don't agree that transformative learning is just about the self. I am more inclined to believe that transformative learning leads to critical self-knowledge, which is about social action. And you would see here on the left, and I don't have time to engage right now, but as individuals, we engage on multiple levels in all our aspects, personal and professional aspects. And I draw here from Bhaskar 7 scale of being. So we engage here right at the core of who we are. What's our identity? But we engage in all of these levels, whether we are part of a discipline, a university, a country, and a world. And this means that the changes we make here at this level in our own thinking, disrupting our own assumptions, has an impact on the rest of our engagements throughout the different levels of Bhaskar 7 scale of being. So definitely there is a relational aspect to what we're doing. And in South Africa, specifically, we subscribe to the African philosophical approach of Ubuntu. And Ubuntu is about I am because we are. So it's not an individualistic approach, it's relational and bringing the self in relation to other. And earlier on, I mentioned the idea of other, and I'm drawing here on a post-humanistic thought that the other is also the human and the non-human entities which we share our planet. And this again, and there's no time to go into Karen Barad's entanglement theory, but basically it suggests that we are not individuals, that we engage interactionally, which means that we are mutually constituted. And when we adopt this philosophy of valuing both human and non-human entities, then we're moving towards ecological consciousness. Then we're moving towards social justice, epistemic justice, and environmental justice. And that for me is just in just a few moments, Jeanette, what I can share about my thinking about transformative learning and how I have adapted it and drawn on other kind of theoretical perspectives to help me understand and implement transformative learning for our South African context. I just placed this here as some of the quotes and people that have inspired me and continue to inspire me in the work that I do at the university. So I leave here with this final thought, Jeanette, going back to the webinar theme of transformative learning in higher education, facing the dilemmas of our times and pursuing a new future. And here we have an opportunity for us all to work together and to draw on Henry Giroux to imagine a future different from the present, not a future which is a different form of the same, but how can we imagine a future that is beyond the present? And if it's not you or me who's going to do this, then who? And if not now, then when? Thank you very much, Jeanette, for this wonderful opportunity to share some thoughts. Thank you.
Eu que agradeço, Naline, a sua palestra, né, extremamente inspiradora e muito interessante como que os dilemas, né, desorientadores foram impactados, principalmente pelo ativismo, né, dos alunos. E aí a importância de ouvir esses alunos, né? E você nos provoca a repensar, né, o que nós estamos de fato valorizando, né? Quem é que nós somos? E eu concordo profundamente com você que a aprendizagem transformadora não é sobre somente a gente transformar a si mesmo, mas ao mundo ao nosso redor, né? E num pensamento que seja descolonizador, né? Porque a gente às vezes nem percebe que estamos reproduzindo situações com as quais a gente nem queria conviver mais, muito mais do que instigando a transformação. Então, obrigada. Eu vou então agora passar a palavra para o professor Paul Dervan e provocá-lo, né, a contar a sua experiência a partir da seguinte questão. Como os professores percebem o envolvimento dos alunos durante as experiências de aprendizagem transformadora em Dublin? E o que você aprendeu ao longo dos anos sobre o engajamento e a participação dos alunos? Também desde já agradeço.
Hello, Jeanette, and hello, everybody. And thanks again for the opportunity to be with you here today, dealing with this important topic. Just to say by way of introduction, myself and my colleague Sandra began this journey in June 2018 after a visit to Oklahoma, where we met Jeff. And we went back and made a presentation to our management, and the senior management in the college asked us to implement a pilot of transformative learning. So in addressing the questions that you have posed, we've put together some slides, and we want to share with you a report we prepared for the management team in June of this year, but it also leverages and takes some feedback we took from students and from staff and from some graduates. They are small numbers, but they do give us a little picture about implementing transformative learning. We have prepared a number of slides. We probably won't deal with all of them just in the interest of time, but you will have them there as a record. So I'm just going to see if I can share it. Can you see that?
Yes, Paul, I can see it.
Yes, that's perfect, Paul.
Okay. So I'm just going to, we work for TU Dublin, and I thought it might be useful just to, without spending too much time on this, just to give you a little profile of TU Dublin. So we're the first technological university in Ireland. We were formed from 3 campuses in Dublin. We're the biggest university with over 28,000 students. Interestingly, 70% of the programs relate to STEM or business. You can see there in terms of diversity. I suppose the interesting one here is we've got 2,500 international students across 100 countries, 3,500 staff, and interestingly, 85% of our graduates are in employment or further education within 9 months of graduating. So in terms of implementing transformative learning at TU Dublin, the first thing to say is that it's modeled on the stellar initiative that Jeff has spoken about at the University of Central Oklahoma. I particularly noted one point Jeff made about transformative learning being important to employers for the skills that it develops and the transparency that it brings to those skills in students. So just to mention that our implementation of Stellar won Best Public Service Organization in the local business chamber in November 2019. And we got very positive feedback from the judges who said, this is an initiative that's very badly needed. So we started a 4-year pilot. Year 1 has completed in June of this year. It involved approximately 800 business students. We did prepare a detailed report, and we have some surveys of students and staff, which we'll share some material with you. I suppose just to explain to you how does it work, at a high level, we promote and record authentic student transformative learning by giving them a number of opportunities. These opportunities can be from tagged activities. So a tagged activity could be attending an event. It could be a reflection on a student's part-time work or a volunteering experience. But the key to it is that they reflect. This goes into their transformative learning record, which in turn can feed into an e-portfolio, which can be shared. Now, how do students gain transformative learning credits? And it's important to note at this stage in terms of the language. When I talk about a credit, I'm not talking about an academic credit. I'm talking about an acknowledgement that a student gets for transformative learning. It's not getting a grade like 50% or 30% or 80%. And they can do this basically in 3 ways: through what we call tagged events, so attending an event, or it might be listening to a talk, a class assignment, which we call it, or a continuous assessment, a CA, or it could be through a reflection that the student chooses to submit. And that goes into the central record store and the student's record. So just to focus on the questions then, Jeanette, you asked us, what have we learned about students' participation in transformative learning? And how do professors perceive the students' engagement with transformative learning? So the next few slides, I just want to share with you what we have found. So first of all, to look at this table, and we've broken into 2 semesters. So semester 1 was, say, from September to December last year, and semester 2 was from January to June this year. And you can see the numbers of students that took part: 785, 795. The overall student engagement in the second semester was 64%, 506 students, which was an improvement on the first semester. The number of events ran in semester 1 was 23, whereas in semester 2 it was 21. And then in terms of stellar tagged continuous assessments delivered by professors, we had 15 in semester 1 and 29 in semester 2. Now this is significant because it indicates that more professors were taking up the opportunity to give students transformative learning opportunities and to gain credit for transformative learning. In terms of the participation, just looking at it in terms of the Venn diagram, that's the breakdown. In semester 1, 11% of students took part in events only. 60% of students, or 261, took part in CAs only. And the balance there, 29%, were involved in both. Over here, you can see sorry. Just out of the way. Yeah. So over here, this shows semester 2. And you can see that the numbers here, 506 students in total, a slight increase in the number of events in percentage terms. I've broken it down a little bit further here. I'm not going to go through the detail. Perhaps if our listeners want to go through this in detail for any questions, I can take those questions. But I suppose the thing to note here is that the COVID did impact our just looking at this orange box, COVID did have an impact on our events. We had 66% taking part here in one stellar event, or 75% here. So the number went up in terms of participation in single events only. In terms of looking at the CAs, continuous assessments, sorry. Again, you can see the engagement here. The good news here is that we had an increase in the number of students involved in continuous assessments. And this is evidence of more lecturers, more professors delivering CAs for their students. Now, some feedback from the students. This is some feedback we did. We got some feedback we got from the students when we did a survey in June. And the first thing to say is that the first item there was feedback from graduates. So we surveyed students who had graduated in November last year and were now in the workplace. And interestingly, 14 out of 15 graduates in the workplace would recommend Stellar to new students based on their experience. Students were asked how they would rate the importance of a number of employability skills over knowledge gained from modules and technology knowledge. And interestingly, employability skills ranked more important than knowledge or technology skills. In response to a question, did Stellar help you? The message we consistently received were it gave students a confidence boost, and that's really important. Some students said that they wouldn't recommend Stellar, and we asked them, well, why wouldn't you recommend Stellar? And they said, well, it was the first year it was brought in, and it felt like I was in my final year, and I didn't have time to do it. So students want more events, more Stellar tagged opportunities. They want more classes in reflective writing and more acknowledgement of Stellar events. Interestingly, 58% said Stellar would not impact their motivations to complete their course in TU Dublin. So I hope you found that interesting. I'm now going to pass over to Sandra, my colleague. Sorry, I have another slide here. How do professors perceive the students' engagement with transformative learning? Well, this is a survey we did with the staff. We got 15 responses. So seven of them said that yes, it did deliver a better learning experience. One said no, and 7 were maybe it did deliver or they were unsure. Here's some free text feedback. It gave the students more confidence presenting and interacting with people. It also helped reinforce what skills they've gained. It improves student engagement. This was an interesting one here. It developed student skills that are not necessarily captured on a transcript. And this comment here, it offers a more rounded picture of student attainment. So this was, how do you believe the students' learning experience benefits Stellar? So before I hand over to Sandra, it was very positive. Students want, and the staff who have participated, see benefit in it. So thanks very much.
Hi, and thank you, Janetta, for the invite to share our experience. I am going to just answer 2 questions that Janetta asked me to address. And one was, how do professors perceive the students' competence development throughout the TL experience in Dublin? I'm going to look at that one first. Paul, can I share my screen so then I can control the slides, please? Oh, thanks, Paul. That's great. So to give some practical and some context to where we're coming from, there's huge pressure on us in Ireland to emphasise the students' soft skills. For example, the World Economic Forum said there's 10 emerging skills for Europe. 8 of those skills relate to transversal skills, soft skills, and 2 relate to digital skills. So there is a huge focus on higher education in Ireland to put more emphasis on developing a student. And I'm going to take Nalina's phrase, holistic student. And she stole one of my lines, and we're trying to make the invisible visible. A lot of the stuff that is already, a lot of the soft skills development that we're doing with students are already happening in modules, in courses. So our lecturers is already doing this for students, it's just that we're not tracking it. There is a huge focus on skills beyond our discipline. So we're talking about teamwork, communication skills, verbal skills, written skills, presentation skills, and all of this is actually being done within a lecturer's module that they're teaching, but it's not being captured for the student. Another focal point for lecturers was that a Student of the Year award is presented to students at the end of their academic year, and it's always based on their GPA, which we call grade point average. So there's nothing there within that award capturing the students' volunteering activities, teamwork skills, leadership skills, and it's not gone on to the academic transcript. So if we just, Stellar, Student Transformative Learning Record, was a way for us to give students formal recognition of the development of these skills. Now, we have to emphasize here, a lot of these experiences are already being done by lecturers and for our students. It's just that we need to give them formal recognition for it. We support the transformative learning pedagogy allows us to support existing learning experiences for students, but it also allows us to support and enhance new transformative learning experiences. So we're acting like a scaffolding for them so that we can help them perform these learning experiences and roll them out for the benefit of our students. We asked the question to our students, to our lecturers, would you like to share how you believe the students' learning experiences benefit from Stellar? And we got an overwhelming response from the lecturers for this. Just 2 quotes which stood out for us. They are more tuned in and more likely to take notes if they have to reflect on the event. Reflective practice is key, and we have seen a student entering in year 1 of their degree is not so good at reflecting, but by the time they come to year 4, they have got the skills to reflect on their experience a lot better than when they were in year 1. The more we introduce reflective writing and critical thinking into our modules, this will benefit the students for their transformative learning. The second quote that stood out for us was, they're much more valuable for their own development, and it promotes an understanding of why and how their theory is linked to real world and how it can be used. And it also enables staff to give an insight whether students fully understand the content or the learning experience. Secondly, we asked them, what is your view on the attractiveness and benefits of Stellar to staff? So this was for us to understand why lecturers are participating in Stellar in their transformative learning experiences and why other lecturers are not participating. Stellar offers a more rounded picture of learner attainment. The second one, it makes lecturers think about the skills and competencies behind assessments. And that's a huge factor for us because we want to kind of scrape back into their assessments and see what transformative learning there is inside those assessments. And that's where we want to build from. Another lecturer said, I think it offers staff to see their teaching and learning being applied to which normally we don't get to see. And the last quote from the lecturer said, I think it allows staff to reward softer skill acquisition without having to incorporate those into academic marks. And it also reinforces their importance for students in terms of employability. And again, that's where we want to go, is to increase their employability. Now, the really important question that Jeanette asked me was how TL helps students to realise their competency development, especially regarding soft skills. For us, and I've taught for over 8 years now, okay, and I see students coming in year 1 and they're very timid, they're afraid to ask questions, they don't like to communicate with the lecturer. But by the time they come to year 4, they're engaging in a conversation with you, they're asking for help, they're working in teams, they're leading in teams, and they're presenting to their teammates and to their class and to our colleagues. And you'd be super proud of the way they have grown from year 1 to year 4. It's just that we need the students to reflect on those experiences and to be able to see that for themselves. And we asked students in our survey, if we can just go to the next slide there, Paul. We asked students if Stella had developed your employability skills and what skills did you develop while engaging in Stella. A huge response that we got was this building on their confidence. And we have seen this for ourselves. We're pushing the students outside of their comfort zone when we provide these transformative learning experiences, and they're building their confidence. And that is so rewarding to see. Second one was teamwork and communication, writing skills, teamwork came out again, and self-reflection, which we really want to add. Teamwork and leadership. And one student said, I had them before, but I got a knowledge how and when to use them. So that was them reflecting on their experiences. And a big one was self-actualization, which was great feedback to get from students, but we need to integrate it more into modules. The other question we asked students was, how does Stella help you to get a job? One student said that she brought it into their interview. And I spoke about the presentation and teamwork skills, as well as my ability to adapt to a global working environment. And it helped improve my way of thinking. So both quotes from a student here saying that they helped them in being a citizen, a responsible citizen within their society. The final question we asked them, did you enjoy the transformative learning opportunity you experienced in TU Dublin, and why? And I'm a firm believer, if the student is enjoying their educational experience, then they will come back for more and they will develop individually themselves. Some quotes from students. I enjoyed the opportunities to a high degree. It has opened many doors for me through learning the importance of soft skills, networking, and confidence. Another student said, I did enjoy it as it was something completely different and unique. The events I have attended have been amazing and would definitely keep doing different ones. The first years coming in will love it. And the final one, which is some feedback for us, they said, reflective submissions can be difficult to do, so maybe teach students how to reflect in an effective manner to increase learning opportunities. And that's one that we have to improve on to make sure the students are learning reflective writing skills and reflective practices from the day that they come into our university. I just want to emphasize one thing before I finish off, is that a lot of these opportunities and these events are already taking part in our university. We didn't create many new events to bring Stella on board because we want to pick up what's already happening already. Lecturers have said to us many times, this is very easy. I didn't realize it was that easy, to give the students the recognition for this experience. And finally, myself and Paul would just like to say that soft skills are an increase in demand. You are already practicing it. We mean transformative learning in your teaching and assessments, and students are already transforming in their learning. A transformative learning record in university only formalises the students' growth for the students. Thank you very much, Janetta, and we say goodbye from Ireland, and if anybody has any question for us, even now or after the presentation, we'd be happy to talk to them.
Muito obrigada Bom, e Sandra, por compartilharem as suas experiências conosco, né, e mostrar que em pouco tempo, né, os alunos se engajaram e perceberam como desenvolveram competências, né, a partir do programa, especialmente porque isso lhes trouxe autoconfiança, né? E foi extremamente interessante ouvir vocês, como eles pedem, né, atividades mais reflexivas, e como a universidade, né, como um todo, engaja os alunos, né, em eventos que sejam transformador, ao mesmo tempo que os próprios professores vão trabalhando isso dentro das suas disciplinas, né? Muito obrigada. E chegaram várias questões aqui, eu não vou poder fazer todas, mas vou trazer algumas que foram as mais recorrentes. Começando com a professora Naline, a professora Rosana Jordão disse que você ressaltou a importância de se considerar o contexto para se pensar em aprendizagem transformadora. E ela gostaria de ouvi-la sobre como pensar na aprendizagem transformadora num contexto de mercantilização do ensino superior e da educação em geral. Professora Naline, se puder nos responder o que pensa sobre isso.
Thank you, Jeanette. Can I just please ask you to repeat that question?
Sim, claro. No contexto atual, desculpa, o contexto que a gente pensa, a importância da aprendizagem transformadora, nós vivemos um momento de mercantilização da educação, né? Onde ela é, sobretudo, vista como um grande negócio. Né? Então, como a gente concilia a aprendizagem transformadora com essa ênfase na mercantilização, na visão de educação enquanto negócio?
Thank you. I think that's a really interesting question, Jeanette. And I think I spoke about it right at the beginning, alluding to the performativity and managerialist approaches to higher education, and that higher education has become very technical, technocratic, and instrumentalist. And I think what we are finding in higher education is that where the purposes are to meet the needs of the economy and to develop utilitarian purposes, that we as well from a transformative perspective need to understand who our students are and what our context is and what purposes the knowledge can serve. So we see education as serving multiple purposes. And one of the purposes of education is freedom and equity for all. So when you adopt that kind of a perspective, then you are balancing the need for instrumentalist and technocratic means with a social justice means to recognize who the student is in higher education, to encourage freedom of expression, to encourage inclusivity, equity, and social justice. And that brings in the kind of inward gaze that we need to engage in. And I spoke earlier on about values. Very often we are caught within this very neoliberal higher education system, but it goes back to asking ourselves as an individual, as a higher education community, as a country, what is it that we are valuing? I hope that will contribute to understanding the multiple purposes that education can serve, Jeanette. Thank you. It's a very interesting question, but it's very difficult also to create that balance in higher education.
Eu que agradeço. Agora, uma pergunta dirigida ao professor Peter Taylor. da professora Antônia Quintão. No contexto atual, temos observado o agravamento dos movimentos de racismo, xenofobia, além de violência nas redes sociais. De que maneira a diversidade biocultural pode contribuir para o enfrentamento destas questões na perspectiva da aprendizagem transformadora? Professor Peter, por favor.
Thanks, Janetta, and thank you for that interesting and important question. I think I understand the question to say, given the violence that we have in societies today, historic violence that's re-emerged under conditions that are imposed upon us by things like unemployment, by the COVID pandemic. It's upsetting our sense of well-being and our sense of community. There's no end of violent news coverage to testify to this. One of the dimensions of transformative learning that I was pointing to was, well, two of them, in fact. One of them is to understand deeply what are the predicates upon which people's beliefs lead them to act in certain ways. And conversely, what is it that causes us as individuals to hold certain beliefs and assumptions about our position in society? And we could, as a white male, an aging white privileged male, are very much aware of the implicit notion of supremacy that's been managing most of the Western world over the last many, many years, and the struggle that people have, other ethnicities and other genders, to find a position of equity and inclusiveness. Transformative learning directs the learner, the student, to interrogate their own assumptions about these important social, political, and cultural issues. We can do that in my area of STEM education, as I was pointing out earlier. Young Nalini, Yuli Ramwati, Dr. Yuli Ramwati, is engaging her students in cultural excavation of their own lives, their own families' lives, to understand the values upon which their current social identities are constructed, and to bring a critical appreciation to the way in which they interact with culturally different and with the natural world. So, as Jeff was saying, transformative learning is arriving at a moment in time in history when the world is fraught with enormous problems, and it seems to be the best fit at the moment to address many of these problems. One of the challenges, of course, for people in my area of STEM education is to go beyond objective knowledge of the physical and social world, and to embrace the development of subjective knowledge, intersubjective knowledge, and to bring that into their pedagogies. Now, that's not an easy thing to do. So what universities need are more Nalinis, more professional developers who've already raised their consciousness to a very high level and who have the means and the support from their university to engage in professional development of this kind. Universities, of course, management of universities, and in Australia, most of the university management are focusing on the economic imperative, particularly because of our pandemic and the lack of overseas full fee paying students. So we need to counter that with a broader vision, a more humanitarian vision, and as Nalini was saying, a more post-humanitarian or post-humanist vision, that we need to ask ourselves, what is higher education meant to be all about? Yes, it's about the economy, but particularly a sustainable economy. And it's also about the world in which we live. both the natural world and our fellow human beings and our own personal well-being. So university management need to establish those priorities in terms of their vision and mission statements. And not until that happens, or maybe the press needs to come from below as well, to re-establish the priorities of higher education. The question is, what is the public good that universities are meant to be serving? And can we have a broader concept of the public good than we currently have? Thank you for your question.
Muito obrigada, professor Peter, pelas suas considerações tão importantes. Eu vou agora dirigir duas perguntas para o professor Jeff King, uma do professor Tomás e outra da professora Maria Luísa. A primeira, Jeff, se você poderia falar um pouco como os alunos são avaliados, né? Ou seja, como professor de determinada disciplina avalia o aprendizado dos alunos em aprendizagem transformadora. E uma segunda questão, na sua experiência, você percebeu resistência dos alunos acostumados com sistemas mais tradicionais de ensino? E se percebeu resistência, como que foram superadas?
Thank you, Jeanette, for those two questions. And I admit from the very beginning, they are common questions that we often get. Obviously, faculty, professors are very interested in what the student response will be to launching a transformative learning approach in their classrooms. And the answer to the first question about evaluating the students, I will connect to one of the points that Sandra made when she was talking about students developing the ability to reflect. And I will connect that with a point that Peter had made about the necessity for higher education to help students understand themselves in relationship to the broader world, to society, to the environment. And the idea of assessing students as they begin to develop transformative understandings, that is, understandings about themselves and how they are connecting, what they are doing in order to advance themselves and advance society, that is a skill that unfortunately is typically not taught in education in many systems, especially in the Western tradition. The focus has been mostly on how to transmit knowledge, if you will. So students aren't very practiced in providing these kinds of reflections, these self-evaluative exercises in which the faculty are asking them to engage when a faculty member prompts a student to create a reflective statement, let's say. And so, as Sandra had said, students come in and aren't very well practiced in doing that, but over time, as they begin to engage in more activities with Stellar and do more of this reflection, faculty can see students starting to understand themselves better. And as a matter of fact, at the University of Central Oklahoma, when a student comes to us, let's say in her first year at university, engages with Stellar along her 4-year undergraduate degree, when she gets to her senior year in her capstone course, where very typically there is a strong focus on transformative activities, the students have actually told us, I was somewhat embarrassed to read how I thought when I came in as a freshman student, because these reflective opportunities to which they have responded across the time, their time at university, has let them see their own growth. And that's where we think is one of the most important benefits of transformative learning, because if faculty do not consciously work to help students develop that sense of thinking about themselves and the world and what they do and how they are for the greater good, then students typically aren't going to have those kinds of developmental activities. So we have a set of rubrics that our faculty use when they read these reflective statements in order to spot the places where students communicate their growth in these areas. And the rubrics then have been very successful in helping faculty be able to gauge students' progress in this way. And then to your question, Jeanette, about are the students receptive to it? We have had an enormous acceptance by students after they understand what stellar is, what transformative learning is, because they see for themselves the benefit. And I will have to share with you that it's also the case that the parents of students really love Stellar, because the parents understand that transformative learning is going to help their child develop in ways that will add more value to potential employers, and therefore the parents are extremely excited for their students to have found a place like our university that emphasizes transformative learning. And yet the students themselves tell us exactly the same thing. And at the end of their time with us, when they're summing up, when we do surveys with them and they sum up what they thought about student transformative learning, we get statements from the students like, it transformed the way I thought about myself, and it helped me understand how I need to be after I leave university. And many of our students tell us, what I learned about myself through transformative learning activities, I took back to my family. I took back to my community, and I had these conversations with my family, with my neighbors, about what is a way of being that can be more positive. And so we've been very happy with the way the students have accepted transformative learning.
Muito obrigada, Jeff, por compartilhar essa experiência conosco. E, finalmente, para o Paul e a Sandra, o professor Rogério de Oliveira, ele gostaria que vocês, se vocês pudessem dar um exemplo, um ou dois exemplos de eventos de educação transformadora, ou de tema, ou de duração, e como que isso é compartilhado, né? O registro da atividade, ele fica no portal, ele tem acesso público, né, essas atividades? Se vocês puderem contar um pouquinho para a gente, obrigada.
Will I take this one, Paul?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Sandra. Yeah.
We work with an event organizer, so it could be ourselves, myself or Paul, or anybody that has a guest speaker coming in to our campus. For example, we had many talks of health and wellbeing events for students, and particularly we brought some of those online because of COVID-19. So we work with the event organizer. We advertise the event through social media, through our learning management system, Moodle, and also on campus posters, etc., etc. But when we record the attendance using a Moodle, it's a plugin that we have developed for Moodle, and we can print out a QR code and we can scan the QR code, which recognizes the student attending that event. And that record will be sent into our learning management system, and the event organizer can then approve that attendance. The student has attended the event, so they will have a record of that, and they can then see that record in their transformative learning record. So that when they go to print off the record of transformative learning, they will see that they have attended that event, and it will be regarded as exposure. Now, exposure recognition for Stellar means that they have just attended the event. They may not need to have to reflect on the event to get exposure. They can just attend the event. If they want to reflect on the event, then they would submit a reflection piece, and either the event organizer, who would have been trained in Stellar, or myself and Paul would review that and grade it against the rubric, and we can give them further Stellar achievements if we think it is better than exposure. Is there anything else to add, Paul?
I suppose just a specific example, which would be quite good. I think it was around last December, the college arranged a session for the local secondary school teachers, the feeder schools into the university, and all of the career guidance teachers were in. And we invited 2 of our students to talk to the secondary school teachers, to talk about their experience in the college. So one of the students who participated availed of the opportunity to write a reflection. So he submitted that reflection, and when we looked at it, myself and Sandra, we were able to see, based on his learning and what I have found is that initially students who want to write reflectively write very descriptively. So they're talking about this happened and that happened and the other thing happened, and there's no exploration in depth. But with this particular student, we were able to see quite clearly that he had learned from the experience and he had grown from the experience, and he felt himself quite privileged, having been asked to speak to the secondary school teachers, and it was quite obvious from what he had written that we were able to see growth. And so I think in this particular case, we awarded him an integration, the highest one being transformative learning. We haven't got any students yet who have achieved that award.
And can I just add that many of our students want more of these events because they are so interested in the events. So it's quite easy to get to the students, to find, like, the students will find out about the events. Our problem on our campus is to get the students to engage more within our campus. So we're constantly trying to be innovative to get our students more engaged on our campus. And transformative learning events has proven to be an instigator to get improved student engagement.
Muito obrigada, eu só tenho a agradecer a vocês. Nós temos inúmeras perguntas, infelizmente nosso tempo já se encerrou aqui. De toda forma, essas falas foram muito inspiradoras, né? E vai nos ajudar agora a gente a pensar nas nossas próprias experiências, no nosso contexto e como é que a gente pode significar a aprendizagem transformadora aqui no nosso campus. E eu espero uma hora poder estar compartilhando isso com vocês também, né? Como que tudo isso acabou nos mobilizando. Eu quero agradecer muito o tempo de vocês, professores também que estiveram aqui conosco o tempo todo, a presença do chanceler, a presença do reitor, das demais autoridades. E quero convidar os professores agora, nos nossos próximos dias, nós vamos ter grupos de trabalho, onde a gente vai discutir a nossa política educacional orientada à aprendizagem transformadora, onde a gente vai pensar quais são as competências, né, que são importantes para a gente desenvolver daqui para frente, né, e como é que tudo isso faz sentido para nós, né? Então, para nos despedir, vocês querem dar uma palavrinha final, cada um de vocês, para o nosso público? Fiquem à vontade.
Yes, thank you very much, Jeanette, for all of your organization to make this happen, and we are very honored. I know all of us are. I wanted to take a moment to say a special thank you to Claudia, Monica, others that may have served as interpreters, because I know how difficult and challenging that job is, and it has been wonderful. So a special thank you to the interpreters, as well as, again, to all of Universidade Presbiteriana Mackenzie and all of my wonderful colleagues. Thank you.
I'd like to second those remarks from Jeff. This has been one of the best organized conferences I've attended as a webinar. And the interpretation side of things is quite new and unique to me. And I found it very, very helpful, very empowering. So thanks, Janetta. I think you did a fantastic job of chairing the meeting and engaging us and the audience. And there's an invisible audience out there of almost 800 people, I've noticed, which is quite extraordinary. And one of the positive side effects of this global pandemic is that we can actually get closer together with people all around the world. And this is a really good example of that. So thanks again. I enjoyed it.
Thank you, Jeanette. From my side, I'd like to also say thank you to everybody. And what I found very useful during this time of the pandemic is the dialogue and collaboration. And those are key. You need to be working with people together, and we need to have spaces for talking and engaging. And that I found is very important. And you have created here, we have 800 people from the university, and this is a fantastic collaborative space. So thank you all for allowing us into the space to make this a really global dialogue and collaboration. Obrigada.
I'll just add, thank you again, Janetta, for inviting us. It was a pleasure. I have learned so much from this experience, and I want to wish you the very best of luck introducing transformative learning into the pedagogy for every lecturer and for the students learning, because I know firsthand that it's so rewarding to watch the lecturer getting so much more from their teaching and the student receiving so much more from their learning through transformative learning. Thank you very much, Janetta.
Just finally, Jeanette, just to second the remarks that were made about your organisation of the event. Well done. It was really, really well organised. And I would say that on a personal note, based on our experience, you're certainly doing the right thing by embracing transformative learning and making it a real presence across your university. And in the future, if you think there's any way we can help, I certainly personally would be prepared to help you.
Eu que agradeço, seria fantástico, eu já estive com o Jeff King, adoraria poder visitar os nossos professores, as instituições de vocês. Quem sabe a gente consegue fazer isso no futuro, mas com certeza vamos estar juntos daqui para frente, trocando experiências e fortalecendo essa rede de instituições e de professores que pensam e trabalham em prol da aprendizagem transformadora. Foi um ânimo muito grande para todos nós ouvi-los. Muito obrigada mesmo e tenham um excelente resto de dia. Muito obrigada, professores, também que continuem com uma excelente terça-feira e ânimo ainda pelo que vem pela frente. Um grande abraço a todos, obrigada às tradutoras, obrigada aos meus colegas da minha equipe da PRGA, que tanto colaboraram para tudo isso acontecer e dar certo. Um forte abraço a todos.